Okay, so it is 3:05 and we'll just be letting in more participants throughout the seminar, but for now we're just going to get started with our introduction. So we are Advocate for Lives, a youth-led organization that raises awareness for both blood and organ donation, as well as healthcare research. And before we begin, we just want to go over some basic housekeeping rules. So please don't spam the chat and keep any messages in the chat relevant to the seminar. As well, please don't have any swearing or inappropriate language, and please keep your mics on mute throughout the seminar just so that we don't have any interruptions. As you guys probably already know, we did give a notification that this seminar would be recorded, and we only do this so we can put it on our YouTube channel for anyone who wants to come back and see it later. And finally, we'd appreciate it if for anyone who wants volunteer hours or shadowing hours for this session, just rename yourself here so that we can just keep track of who came, and then we can put your name on the certificate. We'll also explain the whole process in depth at the end of the seminar.
Okay, so now that we've got that out of the way, today we're going to be talking to Dr. David Langer, who's the chair of the Neurosurgery Department at Lenox Hill Hospital, the star of Lenox Hill on Netflix, and the founder of Playback Health and mentor at Brain Interns.
And we'll also be addressing all your questions that were coming in from the Google Forms and any from the chat at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, Dr. Langer, you can take it away.
Thanks for inviting me. This is a great opportunity. You know, as bad as COVID's been, it's given us this chance to speak to more people and to be have a ability to teach and mentor a much larger number of students. And this is just another example that maybe in some ways it's a good pandemic for that reason. But obviously we've all been through a lot, and I think that I have a talk about leadership that I think is very relevant but to anyone. It's just some ideas of the ways to behave and ways to train your brain to think that may not be something you've learned in school. So I'll give that talk, and I evidently there are some questions. Hopefully we have some time for Q&A at the end, and I appreciate you guys taking the Saturday afternoon to come listen. So I'll share my screen. Y'all see my screen?
Yep.
Great. Letting my slideshow kick in. Let me come out of this for a sec. Go back to the beginning. Try this again. So the goal really of this talk is to open your mind to the importance. You see my screen now, right?
No, it's actually just a blank screen. If you want, you can send the presentation to us and we could try sharing it on our end.
How about now?
We see, I think an arrow. It's like a white screen.
Screen sharing is paused. Bring your shared window to the front. Let's see. How do I do that? This is a new problem for me.
Maybe try re-sharing it so that you're sharing this screen. I think you might be sharing a different screen.
Right. Let's see, remote control, new share. How about now?
It's still white.
Huh. Still white?
Oh, we see it now.
Yeah, that's good now.
So you missed my title slide, but that's fine. This talk basically is to try to teach you some ideas that you don't learn in school. That I don't think anybody makes a big deal about, because in general, in school and in life, we, especially when we're young, until we hit get a job, we're looking at a lot of we're trying to get gold stars our whole life. From very little, getting a gold star was important, whether it was on your tests when you were in grade school or later on. And it morphs into this kind of feedback mechanism where I work hard for myself and I get credit for it and I get ahead. SAT scores, your grades in college, and then maybe your MCAT, maybe it's the grades you get even in medical school. I think the first time this starts to change a little bit is when you go on your clinical rotations, when you're really not evaluated for anything substantive, or it's more objective. That's why all of a sudden personality matters. And people that seem to do well in those situations that are, people call them, a kiss or a goody two shoes or whatever, because they're trying to make their professors like them. And that may work for a while, but ultimately that behavior wears out, because ultimately it's up to you to establish yourself in your career. And it's these three factors, I think, that are the most important for your success in your lives and your careers. Modesty, humility, courage, meaning willing to take risk, and conviction. You need to move from what I would call a gold star mentality to a North Star mentality. Have conviction. There's a woman named Pamela Park at Berkeley who gives a talk about North Star leaders. I'd encourage you to look her up. But basically, as a leader, these are the factors that I found to be sort of the most important. They're representative of the things that allow you to impact the people around you, because ultimately your greatest success comes from the way you influence other people and the way they help you back. And interdependence and solidarity are ultimately the types of groups you want to associate with. And you want to be involved in good cultures. When I started to develop Lenox Hill, the department, we started with zero, and I had to recruit lots of different people, different attendings, different PAs, physician assistants, nurses, administrators, other neurosurgeons. And I kind of think of it as a mobile, and each person has its own weight. And then as you add components, you always have to, every little component balances out the other piece. And you have to be aware of what people's strengths are, what their weaknesses are, who can be close to who, what one person's skill set overlaps with another, because it can throw the whole mobile off. And what was once a very balanced department and one that had a lot of sort of weight to it, all of a sudden you remove something or add something, the whole thing gets thrown out of balance and everything reacts. So as a leader, you have to be aware of what those balance points are. You have to know the length of these arms, how far they are away from the center of gravity, the weight and the density of each one. So the bedrock principles of a good culture are relationships. And in fact, you may not know this, but you're starting your careers right now. A lot of the people that are these four people, myself and my three original partners, the core four of Lenox, I met all these guys growing up. And John Bookvar I met when I was in my middle 20s, Mitch Levine when I was in my late 30s, and Raphael was when I was in my late 30s. I got to know these guys over a period of years of time. And then when I got the opportunity to create something, they were there and they trusted me. They knew me as an honest broker, and they knew I was kind. And they knew that, there may be ups and downs, but they're with me all the time. And I'm able to my accomplishments are enhanced because of them. So be careful. Just because you want to get something, don't hurt people on the way up. Observe people. Observe the process that's going on around you. And I was a rower in college, and there's a concept when you're rowing and you're racing, especially, you have to be careful of not looking out of the boat, meaning you have to keep your eyes on the work, keep your head in the boat, because the finish line is to your back, and you're rowing with your face away from the finish line. If you turn your head and look at your competition or look over your shoulder at the finish line, you're only going to slow yourself down. You're not going to make yourself better. And it's really a metaphor for your lives. Worry about yourselves, worry about your own work, celebrate other people's successes, and help people out when they fail. And the way that manifests even very tangibly in my life is I never look at the operating room schedule. There's no reason to. I know when my cases are because they're on my schedule. You know, one of the reasons why people look at the OR schedule is to see what everyone else is doing, and it makes them feel badly because it makes them worry or try to find out where that person got their case from. Worry about yourself, and everything else takes a good place. So when you choose those jobs, whether it's choose your graduate school or choose the first job or second job or wherever, remember that culture matters. That, you know, if you put two people in a desert island with one piece of meat, they're ultimately going to fight over it. But if you put them into a wonderful restaurant with lots of people and support and great partners, they'll get along forever and they'll share their food forever. And that's the importance of culture. This actually is a video of the start of the men's Elite Eight World Championship, Olympic Championship in Rio de Janeiro in 2016. Just watch the heads of these rowers as they row. Unfortunately, the video's not working. That sort of sucks. Oh, there we go. None of them ever take their head out of the boat. The coxswain keeps the boat straight, and perhaps the coxswain is your mentor, the person who helps guide you. That's the person that you talk to, that you listen to, that when you struggle, they're the ones that give you the guidance and help redirect you if you veer off from your straight point. But you want to keep it a straight line, because the finish line, you never know where the finish line is, but there's no benefit to looking out of the boat. So what the next thing is conviction, and also being able to fail. To have a North Star, to have a goal in mind, you have to be okay with failure, because ultimately, in the short term, you'd be maybe upset at yourself. I've seen my daughter, I tell my daughter this all the time because she's worried about her grades, but imagine if you were getting A's all the time, it's hard to learn. If you can always get everything right, it's hard to adjust and put the effort in appropriately. So not being perfect is a good thing. And in fact, sometimes not being perfect helps you define where it is that what your best function is, what you're most interested in. If you're perfect at everything and everything's easy, it's sometimes harder to figure out what you really like to do. And ultimately, to succeed in the long term, the failure is an absolute necessity, because change is going to happen. You know, when I've lived through 9/11 in New York City, the Great Recession, and now COVID. And during the Great Recession, I remember reading about Wall Street and healthcare and all the massive changes that were going on because of the recession. And you know, even if you look at COVID right now, look at the failure of our government and even our ability to, you know, convince the public about the right thing to do. You know, ultimately change is always going to happen, and you have to expect the unexpected. I'm an eternal optimist, but I've recognized now that there are going to be challenges in my life and things I'm going to have to deal with that are bad. And if you don't prepare for them, you're chronically surprised. Medical people tend to be incredibly risk averse. We somehow feel like because we work so hard and we're smart, we've got all these gold star things on our CV, that somehow protects us from the rest of the world. It's the opposite. In fact, people on Wall Street tend to be a little bit better, much better at managing risk than we do as physicians, because a Wall Street person accepts the fact they're taking risk. They accept the fact that there are going to be good years and bad years. And so when they have a bad year, they're prepared for it. And they get through it by, you know, essentially burying their walnuts and waiting for it to get better again. You know, in my business, I'm a vascular neurosurgeon, and the world changed around me. I love doing open surgery, open aneurysms and ABMs, and the whole field changed. It became very catheter based. All of a sudden, there was these technologies that were eating away at the types of cases I like to do open, with an open skull. And I frankly wasn't that interested in endovascular, these catheter-based techniques, but more and more people were getting trained, and I was doing less and less surgery. And so I realized I had to change. I went, and after being an attending for 10 years, went back and did a fellowship to learn how to do these catheter-based techniques, and it changed my life. I didn't wait till everything was all over. I realized I had to make the change now. And our CEO, Michael Dowling, says that when the wind changes, get a better sail. It's true. You can't just sit on your laurels and expect the world to care. The world's a competitive place. And if you fail or things change, you only have yourself to blame. You know, this picture, my brother-in-law is a terrific fly fisherman. and he wanted to take me fly fishing 2 summers ago. So we went up to upstate New York, and this beautiful backyard of the fly fisherman was there. And I didn't know what this greenhouse was. It turns out that the first day we were up there, I traveled this 5-hour drive, and he tells us it's too windy to fish and the water's too high. I was like, what did I drive all the way up here for? Well, he says, well, it's probably going to be better on the weekend. Besides, I have a lot of work to do, and you guys can fish on your own today, and I'll take you out tomorrow. It's like kind of weird. It turns out that one of the reasons why he wanted off that day was he had to take the seedlings out of his greenhouse and plant them back here. He'd become a hemp farmer. I think he realized that he only can make so much money guiding fly fishing his whole life. And he got a license to grow hemp because there's this huge market for hemp and marijuana now. And he basically built this greenhouse and started his life all over to make himself better. I mean, that's a typical example. Here's a guy that his whole life was fly fishing. He's in his early 60s, and he recognized that the world had changed, and he had this farming skill set that he could, change and make himself better for it, make his family better. I think that's the most interesting manifestation I've ever heard of someone, and we're all capable of doing these things. The point is that we always think we're on some kind of road. We know there are curves in it, but very often we're chasing rainbows. We're chasing some future, and we're following a straight road without recognizing that there could be a truck coming around the other way. When I was in Scotland when I took this picture, I was with my wife at a friend's 40th birthday party, and I sort of I pulled my car, I saw the rainbow, I got into my car really quickly. I had a regular SLR camera. This was before cell phones. Took this picture and got back into my car and never realized that there was a truck in the picture. When I got home and developed the photograph, I was disappointed. I said, oh, the truck ruined the picture. But in the end, it made the picture so much more interesting. And it's really a metaphor for the way all our lives be. We travel on roads we think are straight, chasing rainbows. We know there may be curves in them. And unfortunately, not only are there curves in them, but sometimes there are trucks. It doesn't mean you shouldn't be chasing those rainbows. You have to be prepared to jump out of the way. And that's really what's important about conviction and failure. Because what's most important is doing what's right. Have conviction. Focus on doing the right thing. And if you do the right thing, good things happen. And it shouldn't bother you even if things don't quite work out. Innovation is so important. It keeps you active. It keeps you interested. You aren't doing the same thing all the time. And it could be on a very small level, but it also can be on a very massive level by changing everything you're doing. I think the biggest problem is ego often plays a big role in this, that your idea, your thing, you own it. And the more you can share, the more collaborative you can be, the better chance you have of being successful with innovation. Einstein said ego equals 1 over knowledge. The more you know, the smaller ego gets, because you do realize that you could be brilliant and incredibly passionate and really successful, but ultimately, the more you can contribute to this, and the more you know, the more you realize that it takes lots of other people that are talented to be successful. But innovation is important, and there are really 2 ways to be innovative. There's the creation of your own ideas, meaning I have this great idea and I'm going to try to make this happen. But more importantly, it's adopting other people's ideas and not being afraid of taking other people's ideas and helping other people elevate them, and not feeling like it always has to be your idea all the time. Because whether you're adopting or creating, the success is really depending on managing yourself. Because if you're working with someone else and their idea, chances are they'll help you on your own, and all of a sudden you'll be much more successful. I got really involved in the 3D Exoscope. It's a new way of operating with 3D glasses and looking at this massive screen in the operating room. Very early on, it wasn't my idea, but I thought it would be a great way to operate. And lo and behold, it became, I think it's the future of surgery. We were written up in the New York Times in 2018, and now I'm routinely doing these operations this way. This is actually in the operating room, what this looks like in real time. It's actually a bypass operation. We're sewing these 2 blood vessels together in the brain. You can see how gorgeous this is, and just the environment, just absolutely spectacular. This is actually a video of a craniotomy for aneurysm through the Exoscope. See if it'll work. Nope, I guess not. Anyway, this is the skin, and this is what kind of view we get when we're operating. And I may be able to show an operative video at the end if you guys want. So I can show a different one if necessary. So again, whether you're adopting other people's ideas or creating your own, they both have inherent risk. And very often you work against the conventional wisdom of your professors or your friends who think you're crazy. But be committed to it, have conviction. You know, I was really involved in a project called Ilana, which is a laser catheter to hook blood vessels together. And at the same time, another group was working on a new kind of stent. Both these devices were approved by the FDA at the same week. And it turns out that the pipeline, which is the stent, blew up all the indications for Ilana. There was no reason to use Ilana anymore. And so all that work I'd put into it sort of went away. But what I gained from that was a huge experience in bypass surgery. I went to Europe and Asia and met all these amazing doctors. And even though it quote unquote failed, it radically changed my life. And it became, you know, one of my most important experiences. You know, you have to be careful that you don't allow your ego to take over. And Schadenfreude and jealousy are the same emotion. Schadenfreude is when you're happy about someone else's failure, and jealousy is obviously when you are unhappy with someone's success. You got to eradicate that. Celebrate your friends and your colleagues' successes, and and when they fail, be there for them and help them through it and help them overcome those failures. Because ultimately, there's no real risk whether you fail or succeed, because even failure is often very, very beneficial. And innovation only happens by taking risk. You're not going to be successful all the time. It's driven by necessity, change, uncertainty, and competition. I don't know if you were probably a little too young to remember this guy. You may have watched Back to the Future and remember the DeLorean car. But John DeLorean was a genius designer. He designed the Mustang for Ford, but he was an egomaniac and a control freak. And when he built this unique car, it failed. And the reason was, I think the talks verge, I have to just stop sharing for a second, try to re-download it. It's on Keynote, and for some reason, it crapped out. Let me get back to here. This is actually there's a guy named Dick Fosberg who, let's get this coming back now. Are you all still there?
Yep, we're here.
Okay. Sorry about this.
No worries.
My talk is on the cloud, and I'm sort of it's a big talk, and I think the computer is probably struggling with it. This next slide is about a high jumper named Dick Fosberg. I don't know if you ever heard of him, but basically he was just like all the other high jumpers. In the 1968 Olympics, he won the high jump because he came up with a new way of jumping called the Fosberg flop. And this video is of that event. In the Fosberg flop, he, instead of jumping over with like a scissor kick, which was the old way of jumping, he went over it with his head first or over on his back. And the reason why that worked was because you change the center of gravity from around your waist to your chest. And so you can sort of get the center of gravity much higher up more quickly. And it turns out that he didn't come up with this because he was a genius. It's just that he won the gold medal and everyone changed the way they were high jumping after that. He wasn't even the best athlete, but what the innovation was driven by change. It turned out that in the early 60s, everyone, when they were going over the high jump the other way, was landing on their feet, and it was a hard pit. It was like sand. And even though sand is relatively soft, if you don't land straight on it, you can twist your ankle or twist your knee. And so the track and field authorities changed the landing pit from sand to like a big cushion, like the big pillow, which we all associate with high jump. And he realized that if it's soft, I don't have to go over and land on my feet. I can land on my back. And that's how he changed the high jump forever. So the point is that when environments change, if people change the rules, or there are new ideas that come out, or new technologies, don't do things the old-fashioned way. This is the jump. You can see he's jumping over it backwards. And this is the actual jump. And they used to jump over going forward and scissor kick over it. He went backwards with his back first, and he lands on this soft landing. You can't do that in sand. You'd break your neck. But he recognized that that soft pillow landing is the way to change the way the high jump was done. So I look at that as like Zoom. You know, we used to have phones, and we had FaceTime, and Zoom existed before the pandemic. But what the pandemic was changed, this massive change occurred, and now we use Zoom all the time. And this is a brand new way of teaching, a brand new way of collaborating, and now everyone's using it. But these happens in much smaller levels too in your life, and you have to be resilient. You have to, when there is change, be aware of it. Don't keep going back and doing things the old-fashioned way. You're not just because the pandemic is over, we're not going to suddenly stop using Zoom. No, we'll probably use it even more. I think it's going to change business travel. We're going to be with our kids more because we don't have to travel so much. I can be in Canada today and in New York City at the same time without worrying about my, getting through security and bringing my passport. And the truth is that in order to survive, you have to thrive in these changes and these surprises. That with the tides of change, you just have to learn to build better boats. So the core principles, I'm going to go back to them again, are being fearless, embracing your competition, surrounding yourself with talented people, accepting failure, focus on your long-term goal, find your North Star, stick with it. Recognize that you need to get those gold stars on the way up, but focus on your North Star, and ego is the enemy. So what's culture? Culture is innovation, collaboration, people process, acceptance of failure, and change. And I think in my experience, these are my guys. These are for the greatest people. We love each other. We get along great. It's not always perfect, but we really are always trying to do the right thing. It's what's made our Lenox Hill Hospital so wonderful and my department so great to work in. It's okay to look in your rearview mirror sometimes. There's nothing wrong with looking in your rearview mirror and celebrating your success, but respect the fact that that's not going to help you going forward. What you've done in the past is not going to make you better. It's not going to get you anywhere in your life. And if you keep looking at your rearview mirror, it's kind of like looking out of the boat again. So enjoy it. When you have success, enjoy it, but don't let it define you. What should define you is your family first, your kids, your significant others. These are the people that should matter most to you, and then yourself. This is the last slide. I hope this plays.
Dr. Langer, we can't actually see your screen right now.
You can?
No, we can't.
Oh. So let's go back.
Mm-hmm. No worries, take your time.
See it now?
Yes, now we can see it.
What was the last slide you saw, the Fosberg flop one?
I think it was about adoption and creation. You were talking about the jump and all that.
But you didn't see the jump.
Yeah, we didn't see it.
You didn't. So DeLorean failed because his innovation ideas were the point. His ego is too big. His ego is the enemy, because he had the assets, he had the talent, but his ego and his disorganization prevented his car from being successful. And this is the Fosberg flop. If I can play it, I don't want to get it. Anyway, you get the idea about what I mean about this, about the high jump. He learned how to do the high jump in a better way. See if I can play it somehow. I don't want to screen share again because it'll go off. Anyway, so I said success in a complex world is resiliency. It's basically knowing that change is going to occur, embracing humility. And the fact is that focusing on your North Star and being aware of change is incredibly important. But don't be afraid to fail. And that's really, again, the metaphor. So what are the core principles of leadership and innovation? It's fearlessness, embracing your competition, surrounding yourself with talented people, all these things, accepting that failure, focusing on your North Star, because ultimately ego is your enemy. And culture is these things. It's allowing innovation, collaboration, people process, accepting failure, accepting change. These are my guys, as I mentioned before, the team from Lennox, and the rear view mirror is I made the point, and this is my family. But I do want to try to play this. Hopefully I can get this to play. This is I took this with my cell phone. What I'll do is I will try to screen share. If I don't get it to work, I'll figure it out. But it's from the movie Yesterday, which is about this musician in London who's sort of a down and out musician who never can make it. And all of a sudden there's this big electrical storm and the whole world sort of turns off for a second. And when everything comes back on, everything's normal except the Beatles never existed. The entire history of the Beatles was wiped out with the exception of this one guy. And he starts playing Beatles songs, he becomes like an international celebrity. But what happens is he becomes so famous that his relationship crumbles. It's a lesson about celebrity, and it's a lesson about getting what you really want out of your life and what's really important. And I just record this scene because at this scene, if you haven't seen the movie, I'm going to ruin the end for you. Sorry, but because the Beatles never existed, John Lennon was never a Beatle, and he basically goes back and finds John Lennon, but he was never a Beatle, and this is when he goes to meet him. So let me see if I can get this to play. And how did I do it the last time? It'll come up in a second. My screen's black now, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It just says starting slideshow. And
yeah, it should come on though, because it's I can see that it says you are screen sharing on my thing.
Okay.
I apologize for this.
Honestly, it's okay. There's so many technical difficulties. It's okay.
Yeah, it's not going to work. Okay. I may have this video somewhere else, but long story short, that's the talk. So I apologize for maybe I'll do this. I'll download this while we're talking. I will maybe I can download the talk while we're answering questions. I can play this. So that's it for now.
Okay, no worries. While you do that, we can just get started with the questions, I guess. So the first question we have is, how did you find your passion for neurosurgery?
I mean, I was my dad was a cardiologist, and I wasn't particularly close with my dad. He worked very hard, but he had a stroke when I was 23. And when I got to medical school, it was like in between college and medical school, and I still wanted to be a cardiologist, but I really disliked internal medicine, my internal medicine rotation. I just found it to be all the things it was very selfish. Everyone was trying to one up the other person and prove how smart they were. And I found it to be kind of uncomfortable. And so long story short, I liked surgery. I thought I wanted to be a heart surgeon for a while. And then after that, I kind of I was really concerned that heart surgery would be too narrow, stents and coils and all these things were coming out for coronary arteries. And I realized I love neuroscience and love neurosurgery. And one of the neurosurgery residents I saw putting a emergent ventriculostomy into a skull, and I saw CSF spurting out of the head. And I was like, that's what I want to do. And truth be told, a lot of times the reasons why we choose a specific profession often have more to do with seeing a mentor or seeing somebody that we want to be like. I think that's really important to remember, that you have to find somebody that really look at them and say, I want to be like that person. That's one of the reasons why it's really important we have more diversity in healthcare, because if everybody looks like me, then you can't help but have some bias. You want to see people that are like you, it doesn't mean it's not a racist thing. You just want to see examples of people that look like you that were successful in that field. Because if it's everybody looks different than you, it's kind of like, well, I'm not sure if I'm capable of doing this. And obviously we all need trailblazers that get through, but by having more diverse people, and whether any of the professions or in anything, it gives people who look unlike me the opportunity to really believe that they can actually do it. And the guy I chose to be like looked like me. I mean, he was a white guy with a ventriculostomy catheter. Well, we have to have more people that look like you guys, so that more people like you consider neurosurgery as a career. Because unfortunately, we need it as a human being. It's that extra little thing that helps you open your minds to your opportunities. And it's one of the things I'm very committed to right now is diversity, because it's important that our patients look like us. And because it's important that patients have that confidence as well.
For sure. So I think this is a question that a lot of people think about, but in your opinion, would you say that the long and like tough years of medical school, residency, and other education was worth it?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that a lot of people say, "Oh, you're not working." You're working. It's a job. You get paid. I mean, it's so I don't know how I could ever do that. Well, like, you know what? When you're in a regular job, when you're 22 or whenever, or 20, say, come out of grad school, you have a job and you're learning. Being a resident, yeah, medical school is it took me 5 years. I was slow, but the truth of the matter is that residency is residency. You're getting paid. It's a job. You're learning. Or you're not making lots of money. You're making enough. It's some of the best times of your life, actually. You meet wonderful people. Every day is a challenge. You're working your ass off. And the truth is, you may not have as much free time. You may not be able to go on that beach vacation in the summer, or that timeshare, or whatever people do. But I have zero regret about what I did. Less than zero. But it's not for everybody. You have to be committed to it. You have to be willing to make sacrifices. You have to be willing to delay gratification. You have to be willing to accept the fact that you're going to be working for other people for a long time. But it's not easy to become a neurosurgeon, or a doctor for that matter. You have to learn a lot of stuff, and it's all experiential. You read too, but nothing beats experience. The more time you put in, the more you get out, period. And it's necessary so you can be good at what you do. And look, when I finish my residency, I continue to learn. I do nothing today, almost nothing in the OR the same way I did when I was a resident. That Exoscope didn't exist. I didn't learn how to do bypass as a resident. So is all that time that I've spent putting that, it's the same thing. I'm still learning. And that's what's so great about medicine. It's a lifelong learning, lifelong impact, lifelong giving back, tremendous feedback, incredible experiences. Just your life is so fulfilled. Sometimes, even just yesterday, we're doing some more filming, and this crazy thing happened. I was like, I just can't believe I actually live this life every day. It's just crazy. And we're very lucky to be doing what we're doing, and I have zero regrets.
That's awesome. I think everyone was really inspired by that. Another question we had was, what was your personal education pathway?
Well, I obviously went to college, and after college, I wanted to go to medical school. I didn't get into my first choice, and I got into Penn Med. And I'd been there for 4 years, and I kind of was like, you know what? I think since I'm going to be in Philadelphia for another 4 years, I really like to take a year off. And luckily, my parents were supportive of me, and so I took a year off. I went to England for a year. I went to Cambridge, and I spent a year in Cambridge. I actually went there more to have fun than anything. And I was a rower in college, like I told you, so I rowed crew at Cambridge, and that was a great year for me. I developed a keen sense of sort of other, what other people were like, and the rest of the world. It was really probably one of my greatest experiences. And after that, I came back. I did my first 2 years in medical school, and then in my third year, I was asked to take part in what was called the 4 Schools Physician Scientist program. and take a year out from med school to do your research. During that year, I did research in a lab where I met Kate Carrico, who is the woman who basically established the science that's the underpinning of the coronavirus vaccine. And Kate had a tremendous impact on me. I worked for her for the next 10 years on and off. So that year off in medical school was just incredible. It was, just one of the most amazing experiences for me. And it really, taught me about research and taught me so many things and I had this incredible time to be with her. And then I finished med school 2 years later, and then went to residency for 7 years. I did an extra year after residency of fellowship because I wanted to learn a little bit more. And then I even, like I said, 10 years in, I did another fellowship in 2009, 2010 to learn how to do catheter techniques. And that was my training basically. It sounds kind of endless, but it's not. It's a continuum of teaching, learning, relationships, mentorship, being mentored, and every single part of it was valuable to me. And I wouldn't have changed anything. I mean, I think taking time for yourself and doing things out of the ordinary and not doing what everybody else tells you to do is incredibly valuable. And I don't listen to what everybody else is saying. Do your own thing, be your own person, and you're likely to, and make good decisions. If you think something seems good and seems right, then go for it. And the worst that can happen is it can be bad and you learn something else. So that's basically my trajectory.
Mm-hmm. So this is a more lighter question, but what do you think is the most interesting part of your job currently?
Well, I think the most quote unquote interesting is probably some of the kind of things I encounter in a typical neurosurgical case, where you see something that you haven't seen before, or you have to solve a problem you haven't solved before, and you really have to, go back to your experience and do something and try something. That's certainly the most interesting. The most gratifying, I think, is just seeing the growth of our team and feeling like I'm really impacting my junior partners and seeing their success. I mean, to me, that's the most impactful. That makes me feel like I'm leaving a legacy and creating opportunities for other people. And it's validating because I think I had this idea of what I wanted a department to look like. And it proved to me that my kind of sense of doing it the right way, the right thing, proved to be correct. And we're really setting a standard now for, I think, the way you should organize your department and organize yourselves. So they're two very opposite things. One is with myself, and the other is seeing other people be successful. And I think that's the best way to answer that question.
Awesome. And another question we had was, how do you balance your work life and your personal life, and how has that changed with COVID-19?
COVID's been great because I've seen my kids a lot more because I'm home more. I'm not traveling at all, and I'm like doing Zooms, and that's fun. But that's the way COVID's really changed my life. Not to mention some of the more significant changes at work. But a lot of people ask me about work-life balance. The truth of the matter is that I don't really see it that way. I think that there's really no such thing. I think it's one long continuum, that work and life are kind of one thing. I mean, my work at work is my life, and my work at home is my work, and they're very interconnected. I think the most important decisions you can make as a person is your career choice and who your significant other is. And if you don't have balance, in other words, if you aren't super happy with your work, and you're not also really happy with your significant other. In other words, if you don't love your partner unconditionally, then you don't have balance. And by the same token, if your partner doesn't really respect what you're doing at work, or if you're at work to get away from your partner and staying away so you don't have to go home, that's a problem. And you never have balance. So the point I'm trying to make is, it's very hard to do that if you really, really love what you do and you're really stimulated, and such a thing like neurosurgery, or if say you want to be president of the United States, or you want to be impactful in an NGO, or you want to be in the Supreme Court. I mean, not that you should do that. These are reasonable things to think about, not that you're going to get there, but respect the fact that the most important you can have is a partner that respects you and shares that with you, and wants you to be as successful as you want to be, and gives you the support. And that way, when you go to do stuff, and when you when you have that opportunity, you don't feel like you're letting anybody down, and you're all of a sudden you're killing it, and your wife or your partner or your husband or whatever celebrates it with you. And my wife knows that how passionate I am, and she knows I'm not home sometimes, but she knows I'm not like dilly-dallying around and I'm not home because I don't want to be home. I'm home because I'm doing something that's important to me. And I feel the same way about her. Children probably suffer in more ways from having a dad like me, but I think my kids see the passion I bring to my life and the ethic, and I set a standard for them. And certainly as they've grown up, I think they've become more aware of my way I think, and for that reason, I think they have derived a keen sense of their own lives. And as I've gotten closer and closer to my kids as they've gone older, and I think a lot of doctors, a lot of surgeons for that matter, are really, busy professionals. It's sometimes you're away from your kids when they're little, but what happens, it's not that your kids are getting older, it's you're just becoming more mature in your career, and you have more time, and you can find more time as you get older. So it's something to be said for having kids when you're young, so you have more time with them when you're older.
Mm-hmm. So somebody was wondering, what was one patient case that is really memorable to you, or has changed your life or career in some kind of way?
Everyone expects me to come up with some incredible case. I mean, I've had obviously a lot of good successes. I mean, the biggest success that comes to mind are some of these massive bypass cases that I do, which I can remember many of them. But for better or worse, the things we remember the most are often terrible disasters, the ones that are failures, and they impact us much more deeply than the successes make us feel good about ourselves. It's no balance at all. I mean, I'll give up 100 successes to get rid of one of my failures, maybe 1,000. I mean, forget about it. And there are really two failures that had the most impact. The one most recently was right after Netflix came out in July. I had a complication of actually a friend of mine I operated on who died. It didn't all happen at once. It was just this crazy series of complications, none of which I directly caused, but I knew his family, I knew his kids, I knew his wife, and I'm still not quite over it. It's been since July. And I think that, it taught me, it's really taught me my own limitations, and it gave me more, it just showed me my own, there's only so much you can do. And I knew I did the best I could, but it ended up in the worst outcome possible. When someone dies, it's one thing if it's a really risky operation. This wasn't even a risky operation. And so this, to me, will live with me forever. It's an example of how failure can impact you in a positive way. It's incredibly humbling, and it's one that I'll never forget. There's no way. And this will live with me. It's like a scar now. It's not an open wound anymore. It hurts a little, like the scab's falling off, but I can still feel it. It's still a little numb around the wound kind of thing, but we all carry those things with us. I have that movie now, if you guys want to watch it real quick. You want to see it?
Yeah, sure.
I think this should work. See my screen?
Yep.
And I'm not going to put it on, it'll be smaller because I'm afraid if I go to the play function. So remember, he's meaning John Lennon, but John Lennon was never a Beatle, right?
Hello? Can I help? I don't know. You Joe? That's right. In Liverpool. That's right. I wanted to meet you. or successful. You just said very happy. That means successful. Did the job I enjoyed day after day. Sailed the world. Fought for things I believed in. And won. A couple of times. Found the woman I loved. Fought hard to keep her to live my life with her. Fought hard for her. It would complicate. Sorry, what was your name? Jack. There were complications in Jack. Loss and gain. Prejudice and pride. Well, it all turned out just fun. That's all of life. Bad. Let us slip away. Try to get it back. Not a good life. It's not complicated. Turn out and get out the Lord. Did you know that? And tell the truth to everyone whenever you can. Can I give you a hug? So good to see you. How old are you? 78. Fantastic. You made it to 78. Very strange, man. Go ahead. You need serious psychiatric help. Not anymore.
That's from the scene. It's called Yesterday, the movie. Someone asked there. But it's funny. It's very, especially, everybody else, what's it like to be a celebrity? Or I'm not a celebrity, it's a bunch of crap. But I learned pretty quickly that it's not what you think it is. And, being recognized is fun. It's not happening nearly as often as it did, the first few months after the show came out. But I always say it's almost like chewing gum. It's like it's fun for a second, like it tastes good for a while, and then you just want to get away. And then all of a sudden you want it again. And it's not that great, really. And I think that the truth is, if you live an Instagram life and you're always worried about promoting yourself, or you're living a Google life and you're always looking for what somebody else is saying or doing, it's not a good way to live. You should live your own life. And the point is that don't look at some of the people who think they have it so great. I mean, that was a typical example between this guy who would have been a Beatle had the world he would have been, and yet he had this wonderful life, just falling in love with his wife and doing these things. And here's a guy that had everything he ever wanted by being a rock star, and he lost everything because he couldn't maintain his relationship. And so it's a lesson, and I think it's a very valuable one, and it really sort of brings a lot of these ideas together.
Yeah, definitely. Another question we had was, what would you say are your regular responsibilities or daily routine?
I mean, I'm about 50% clinical, 50% administrative. I mean, and maybe another 50% of everything else. I operate about 2 days a week. And then I have a day of office hours that I see patients. And the other 2 days on average are spent, meeting some sort of administrative task, teaching, research, writing papers, doing Zooms, so that's kind of my day.
Mm-hmm.
No 2 days are ever the same. That's what's so great.
Yeah, there's a lot of variety, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so somebody was wondering, how can someone deal with the feeling that maybe they're not good enough or just general insecurity about their abilities?
Well, first of all, you're much better off that way than being overconfident. So that's a good thing. And you sometimes have to find things to prove to yourself what you're capable of doing. It's hard. There's this imposter syndrome everybody talks about, like once you get the credibility and how you deal with that. But this is what life's all about. I think for me, I remember when I was a third-year resident, I was when you operate, you always reach a point that you can't go on anymore when you're learning. So first you open the skin, and then you can't use the drill, then you learn to use the drill, then you do the craniotomy, then you don't know how to open the dura, and then you open the dura, and then each step along the way, you learn the next step. It's a stepwise process. I remember I was going to do what's called a corpus callosotomy, which is you open. I could do everything, and I got down to the corpus callosum, and I just couldn't do it. I mean, I just didn't have the dexterity to get to this go in between the hemispheres, and I got so angry at myself. I was so upset, and lo and behold, I came back, and I don't know, a few weeks later, and did it, and I was able to do it that time. And so the point is you're never going to be confident completely of what the end point is, but also give yourself a chance to push yourself as hard as you can. I mean, you think Olympics, you win a gold medal in the Olympics, no, you train your ass off and you work as hard as you can and you hope that you'll win. But whether you win or not isn't really the point, because you can still be a great runner. And so you have to just do the best you can. There are going to be some hard stops. I mean, the bottom line is if you don't do well on your scores, you're not going to get in medical school, no matter how hard you want to be a doctor. And then no matter how badly you want to be a neurosurgeon, if you don't match a neurosurgery, you're not going to be a neurosurgeon. But then you just find another pathway. But always do the best you can. That's all you can do. And I doesn't mean I have a good answer for that, because you have to develop self-confidence. I have a tremendous amount of self-confidence, no question. I do. It's not an ego thing. I just will always be willing to try something, because I really don't. If it doesn't work, okay, I'm not going to be so hard on myself. And that's kind of the way I've overcome it.
I think that's some really helpful advice. But another question we had was, do you have any tips for extracurriculars in terms of how you should approach them and what you should look out for?
Well, there's two kinds of extracurriculars. There's transactional extracurriculars, and then there are non-transactional extracurriculars. A transactional one is you're doing it to put it on your CV. That you're putting on there so if somebody sees it and says, wow, they did things outside of school, and we know what those are. And then there are non-transactional ones, which are things you just do because you love to do it, regardless of what people think. You do have to have a combination of both. And I think that what I'm trying to say is, yeah, you got to go do the lab work and the internships and do the research, but try to find things that accomplish both. Like try to find something that you really, really turns you on, that you're really excited about, and gives people insight into your passion and how hard you're willing to work. In other words, if you do things solely transactionally, then you end up kind of like winging it, and you may not be doing it, and you're not going to get as much out of it either way, and you won't accomplish as much. And when you do get asked to do things, or when you're considering doing things, just make sure you know which boat you're in there. Make sure you know why you're doing those things. And if you have options, choose the one that you're more passionate about, because you're more likely to be successful.
Mm-hmm. So the next question is, how many years of research or like number of publications would you recommend for an IMG who wants to pursue a neurosurgery residency?
A lot of people ask me this question. It's super hard, and there's no number. You need luck. And I took care of a Saudi Arabian kid that had almost, I think, 200 publications when he was applying for residency. He just texted me today. He's at the University of Pittsburgh now. He was so far beyond, he was like 2 orders of magnitude more than the average applicant. I mean, just insane. In fact, when I was interviewing him, it turns out we had written a chapter together. I had no idea who he was. A guy that I turned a chapter of, sent it to him. He wrote it, and we were all co-authors in a chapter together. I was like, oh my, so crazy it was. But the trouble with IMG is that it's such a competitive residency just here in the U.S. that if you're a foreign medical grad, or even if you're an American who goes to a foreign medical school, it's very hard. And unfortunately, the responsibility of the residency training programs is Americans first. It's not fair. It just happens to be that our training programs are the most sought after in the world right now. They're the best training programs. Part of the reason for that is they're the best designed. They're the most thoughtful. Our residencies are, the RRC, or the review committees, and the ACMG is very involved in accreditation. And that process requires that these residencies have a certain, quality of life, and a certain amount of downtime, and a certain amount of didactic training and lab time. the clinical volume is checked and rechecked. So there are really no bad residencies. And that's much different than the rest of the world. So, but that cost is to our taxpayers and to our government. And so there's a big incentive to take Americans. It doesn't mean you can't match an American program, but respect the fact that it's as much up to luck, that you absolutely have to do as much research as possible, but really important research, like really published papers, like first author, named journals, not just like third author on some, crappy throwaway journal. And you have to move here and probably work with another scientist or hopefully someone who knows neurosurgeons or whatever field you want to go into that can make a phone call. And then ultimately it becomes just luck, like something opens up and you're just the go-to person for whatever reason. That's the way that usually IMGs get in. But I can tell you in neurosurgery, despite the difficulty, I'd say at least 5 or 10% of American neurosurgeons are foreign medical grads. And that's because there are so many that come just waiting, or they're like in the bullpen, waiting for the pitcher to screw up, and then they're there. And very often they're well known to people who are making decisions because they've written and they know they're committed. But remember, it goes back, they're committed because they love it. They're not just doing it just to do it. You can't do it for that long. You can't write 200 papers unless you're really willing to write papers and really passionate about it. It's just impossible. You can't fake it for that long. So that's why it's important that you really understand yourself before you embark on that.
For sure. And this goes almost in the same way, but it's like, what advice do you have for high school students who are finding their passion for a medical specialty?
I mean, just be prepared for, it's competitive. It's only harder to get into medical school now than it was even a few years ago. It's 55% of the applications are women. So it used to be easier to get in, you're a woman. Now it's actually probably a little bit harder. I think that you have to, everything matters. You just, unfortunately, you need gold star stuff. You really have to get great grades and do really well in the MCAT to have a good chance. And that's just because it's not fair. There are probably some people who would have been great doctors. They have like a 3.4 and did okay in their MCAT. And there are some people who have a 4.0 and got like a 30 whatever on their MCAT, or wherever the top score is, who are terrible doctors. But if on a bell-shaped curve, if you look at the overall group, and these places have to choose when they have, 3 applicants for every 1 spot, they're going to make it easier on themselves by using these thresholds and cutoffs, because that's just the way you cut out half the applications. And if you don't make that threshold, it's very hard to get into medical school. And I know people ask about DO or foreign medical schools. I guess most of you are Canadians, so I don't know if there's a DO program up there, but if you default into DO programs or foreign medical schools and you want to come back to the US, you can go in Canada, you can go to European medical schools, which are excellent, and still come home. But the fact of the matter is that it's just much harder. I don't think the training is as good, and the mentors aren't as good, and the research isn't as good. It doesn't mean the DO school, you can't be a doctor. It just means the people you come into contact aren't as ambitious, or they wouldn't be in DO programs. And the opportunities to do research and really be innovative aren't there because the innovative people aren't around either. And so the people you learn from and that you culturally get adopted to, you aren't imbued with that during your training, when it's the most important time. It doesn't mean it's worse. It just means you're not going to have the opportunities that I had. And I would never have met Kate Carrico in a lab had I not been at Penn. It wouldn't have happened. And look what happened to her. So, that's why it's important to go to a good place.
That makes a lot of sense. So somebody was wondering, what kind of advice do you have for pre-meds to stand out? Because we know that it's a super competitive admission process.
Don't be afraid to do things out of the ordinary. There's obviously requirements that you have to fulfill, but that's just that's the baseline. I also really encourage people taking a year out before medical school. And I think that experience, even if it's not directly medical related, shows maturity. It gives you some time off between your undergraduate. Apply for scholarships, apply for the most competitive ones, Rhodes scholarships, Marshall scholarships, all these things. And if you aren't in that league, then find other things to do. If you have to make money, find ones that pay. Even if you're working a second job, say you're working in a restaurant or you're working, in some other low-level job, make ends meet and do something really unique that you really love to do. Travel, go visit other people. These things are incredibly important. Also, just to look back on in your life and take that time when you're young before you have a mortgage and kids and all this other stuff. And so I just think just be yourself. The medical schools are becoming more and more kind of sensitive. It's not all hard science and physics, And I think that in the end, take advantage of that and do something that really excites you, that you can speak to, that you can write about, and that experience becomes part of your soul and who you are. So you become a much more interesting applicant. And ultimately, you just want to be different than everybody else. And I think you have to ensure the grades and the MCAT scores are there. So if it means taking a year out and studying for your MCAT during that time, so you really have time to do it, I think it's a good thing to do also. If you're, especially like I was an athlete in college, it's hard. I mean, if you're an athlete and you're studying for the MCATs and you're pre-med, it's an awful lot to ask. And it wasn't as hard to get into medical school when I was applying as it is now. So I might not have been as successful if I was applying now. I might have had to take a different pathway. But you have to know what you're capable of. We all have a limit to our tank, and you have to do what you really plan these things ahead of time. Talk to your parents, make sure they know what it is that you're concerned about and why you think you want to do one thing or the other, and make sure you can economically get through these stresses, because it's a long road and it's a financial hardship, especially in the U.S.
For sure. We're a bit over time, and I know everyone probably wants to go, so we're just going to quickly end this off. I think one of the questions we had at the end is just, how do you see the evolution of neurosurgery in 10 years from now?
I think we're going to see more women in neurosurgery, number one. I think we're going to see less and less invasive approaches, where I'd be surprised in 50 years we'll be opening heads at all. I think if we do, we're going to be putting little electrodes in, or make a burr hole and put a catheter through the brain or through a blood vessel. We're going to have much more, whether it's radiation or ultrasound or radiofrequency ablation, or there's going to be all sorts of, new ways of treating brain problems, not to mention medical. We're going to probably start solving some things that we currently need a suction or a knife for with a drug or a device. And so for that reason, one of the reasons why neurosurgery is more appealing to women, I think, and this is not really, people say I'm being misogynistic or anti-women, is that, the men have testosterone. That's not going to change. Men in general are a lot more attracted to some of this last slash and gore and screaming and yelling and trauma. And, that's why cardiac surgery is still very male dominated. It's just the nature of what you're doing, and the emergencies and the just horror show, people dying on the table. It doesn't mean women can't do it. It's just on a bell-shaped curve, there are more men that like that environment. In neurosurgery now, what's happening is it's becoming less like that. When I was training, it was a much more of that, trauma and big openings, big operations, people dying and not doing well. And some of this kind of more, finesse surgery, first of all, it's a better quality of life. You can be a mom and still do this stuff and have kids. And it doesn't mean I care about that too. I wanted to be a dad, but I didn't have to go on maternity leave. I didn't have to carry a baby for 9 months. So it's a physical thing you have to go through. And so those are making neurosurgery, the fact that it's not as sort of Sturm and Drang, and it's not as crazy, and that we have all subspecialties in neurosurgery, functional neurosurgery, epilepsy, some of the catheter-based treatments. It's more accessible to people who want to have that balance. They want to love their job and be able to love their significant other and do things they love to do. So that's why I think neurosurgery is going to have more of that than it has historically. Not to mention that the whole militaristic, often, never going home thing is gone, and it appeals to everybody now in a way. And women tend to be smarter than men sometimes. They're like, I'm not going to do that. Those people are nuts. Why would I? Why I would? I'm not. And it's true. And so now it's more like, hey, I may have to work hard, but I think I can do that. And going back to that original question someone asked, like, how do you know you can do it? Again, it's kind of just this bell goes off in your head, like, you know what? I think I can do that. And you do, and you can. And it's there for you now.
Okay, thank you so much for your answer. And that's all for our questions today. So thank you so much again for giving us this amazing presentation and answering all of the questions that everybody had. Would you like to give any final comments?
Yeah, sorry about my talk getting crapping. And next time I'll download it hard copy onto my desktop. That was my bad. But I'm glad you guys reached out. Appreciate the opportunity, and hopefully this will impact y'all in a positive way. We are doing brain turns again this summer, so we'll have a whole new set of lectures and new people. We're in the planning phases now, so please sign up and tell your friends and promote us on social. We already have about 5,000 people signed up for it, and so we really enjoy that, and we look forward to seeing some of you with us this summer in July. And again, thank you for taking the time out of your Saturday. We're all, as far as signing up, if you, it's called Brain Turns. If you go Lenox Hill Brain Turns on YouTube, or look us up on the web, it's all over social. If you search Brain Turns on social, there's the invites there. You can track us down. And if you I think our two hosts or hostesses have my email address or my secretary's email address. You can reach out to Katie and get her the link to sign up for Brain Turns as well. So I think it's a great program. We have some really cool things in store this summer, and I think you'll find it to be. It's 3 hours a day, 3 weeks in July. We're doing a Spanish one. The last week it'll be all in Spanish. We have a lot of Spanish-speaking students that signed up, and so it's all free. So there's no cost. So that question, and we look forward to doing it again this summer, starting July 1st.
Yeah, that sounds like an amazing opportunity. We'll make sure to post it on our socials so that everybody knows about the opportunity.
Yeah, great. I mean, the social pictures out there all over the place. So we'd be happy. We will certainly follow you guys too to help you get. Well, tell me about your organization. Where does that come from? How did your organization start?
Oh, Simon, you want to talk about it?
Sure. We're just high school students. We're actually in grade 12. I kind of forgot that for a second. And we just wanted to talk more about blood donation, organ donation, and recently we shifted to research. So we've been just reaching out to as many doctors and medical professionals as we could. We've had like pharmacists, and we have some PAs hopefully coming soon. So yeah.
So there's no age limit. You could be an embryo if you want to sign up for Brain Turns if you want. I don't know if you'll understand anything. And most of the content's for everyone. It's really at like a medical student level, but even if you haven't been to college, if you're science-based, you'll get a lot out of it. Actually, last year's lectures are all on YouTube. So if you want to go see what it looks like, Lenox Hill Brain Turns are on YouTube. So we've had a huge amount of hits on that. So you can go check us out there. And lastly, there was one other thing about high school that you said. No, that's pretty much it. I mean, you're more than welcome to join us. So all you guys in a college now, I guess? You've gotten in?
Yeah, we're in the process of all that.
Are you mostly going to American schools or Canadian?
Some of our friends are going to American schools, but it is really expensive there compared to Canada. So most of us tend to stay here.
I wouldn't blame you. Your parents are happy.
Definitely. All right, guys.
Oh, great. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.